So today we're going to be talking about is Ares, what he represents and kind of the essence of his character. So when we look at it, Ares was the sister to the brother to his sister Athena. Okay, tongue twister. And they came from Zeus and Hera, right? Ares was just as powerful as Zeus. Athena was not, right? And Athena represents wisdom, and Ares represents war. Okay. All right. So so what's the purpose of war? We'll get right into it, right to the heart of it. What's the purpose of war? Well, when we look at war, it's usually over a boundary or distinction, right? So what's a boundary? Well, is a boundary a physical thing? Well, no, because it has infinite length, infinitely small volume, and it has zero width. Now, can a thing, like a physical thing, have zero width? No. No. So a it's not physical, it's metaphysical, it's an idea, it's a distinction, it's a category, right? And when we put things into categories, we're just making distinctions from other things. Now, that doesn't mean that they're at the negation of others. Just because you establish that something exists or something that doesn't exist or something is over there or this or that, it's a matter, they're all there. Just like if you draw a line down a piece of paper, you're not negating the entirety of the piece of paper, right? All you're doing is making a distinction from this side to that side. And then we can easily draw relationships, right? Between, okay, where's this specific dot? Well, it's on the left side of the paper versus the right side of the paper, right? So we can change our perspectives and move things around, but that's an idea, right? So everything that Ares represents in terms of aggression, in terms of the realities of war, or everything that would be in play to keep a boundary or to expand one is all in service to that boundary. So if everything's in relationship to that boundary, wouldn't it make sense that the person or idea or character that can best choose the ones that the boundaries that are worth defending or not defending or pushing the attack, or that's why Athena represents strategy, right? Because she knows which one to choose and which one's worth actually going for. Imagine Ares has all of this stuff, all of everything you could possibly do, but has no predilection of what's better, what's worse, right? And especially if he's kind of more that, because they both fight. They both fight. So they both engage in warfare, in terms of, Athena represents, wisdom and battle tactics and all that stuff. Well, you kind of have to, in terms of if Sparta's like literally right around the corner. But she defeated Ares whenever they fight. Whenever they fight, she defeats Ares. Why? Because she knows which ones are better than others. So, but having a spectrum of good and bad is the entirety of those ideas of boundaries, right? So when you have an entirety of something, and then you simply look at it and use your wisdom to discern which ones are worth it, which ones are better, of course you can defeat the rest. Of course you can make better decisions than the rest of the principle. If you're wiser, then, if, it's all in relationship, right? Wisdom is all in a relationship. You're either, of course, the absolute principle of wisdom, and then everything is in relation to that, right? So no matter how, I don't want to say, it's like how nescient, if they know or they don't know or they choose not to. Well, there's a certain amount of wisdom that they have that system's there, right? They're thinking rationally and they're making rational decisions with the things that they have in the systems that they know, that they're comfortable, that they're familiar with. And that might be difficult because we see people, out there, of course, that maybe do things against their best interests or the best interests of other people. Well, in relationship, if you look in their childhood, maybe some of those behaviors kept them alive from the people that they were with. And especially if you're dealing with some people that may have had, may have been from some really, 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 really rough situations, and especially back in the past when like Sparta and Athens and all these, it was not, paradise. It was nothing like today. In terms of today, it's like violence is down. Violence is majorly down from historical stuff, and you can look up this Stephen. I have one of his books on my shelf. Like the Stephen Pinkert lecture on violence from, I think it was Stanford. I think he did it. It's like on the Stanford YouTube channel, but you can check that out. But yeah, so if Aries is the totality of boundaries and everything is in service, like all the actions, all the verbs, is enforcing boundaries, Athena just enforces the best one, which destroys all the other possibilities. And that's why she won, right? Now we could even extrapolate this further because, well, so if Aries is actually, if all the behavior is actually just enforcing boundaries, wouldn't Aries just be the god of the spectrum of boundaries that somebody could have? Wouldn't that also make sense with Aphrodite, beauty? That when beauty and boundaries, so distinction, come into play, then they make the different kinds of love or horror or, you know, all these specific emotions that come from that. That might be a little bit more universally applicable. You know, I know that's not exactly what the mythology says, but if we think about it, war doesn't exist on the moon. Therefore, Aries doesn't exist on the moon as a principle. That's a very shallow principle. You know, wisdom, you know, or beauty, you know, you could see everywhere through the good. You know, if you see something that's beautiful, well, there's something in your mind, you know, and these are ideas, right? So these are all through the perceptions and the modalities of the knower, right? So through our modalities, we know wisdom. Through our modalities, we know what boundaries are. Through our modalities, we know what good is on a spectrum of good. Through our modalities of knowing, we know what beauty is. Now that changes from different perspectives, right? So, but the universal principle that we could all accept would be boundaries. And then the wisdom to discern which ones are worth pursuing over others. Something to think about. So that was kind of my look into Aries, because like if we think of an idea, you know, as a principle or concept that, you know, takes place all around us, that's everywhere, quote unquote, you know, metaphysically, it'd have to be everywhere in the universe. Like it can't just be, because there's distinctions and boundaries everywhere in the universe. So as a universal principle, Aries, the principle, you know, if we considered Aries the embodiment of distinction and boundaries, everywhere. And that makes it more useful because then it's not just like, oh yeah, he's just this random dude, you know, doing things, and you know, he's fighting Troy, fighting in Troy, and then turns around because Athena beat him, and it's just like, ugh, it's just, you know, of course the story's good, but it's supposed to, you know, it's different between getting caught in the words and getting the meaning behind it, or at least deducing something more useful than mythology, so you're not actually stuck with some doctrine, but you can actually branch out and say, I think this is more true. You know, so you're not just stuck with something that's really old and thinking that's the greatest thing ever, but you actually branch out and you touch on the key principles that might be before, you know, might be causal in terms of what the principle's going for, because if you don't have a boundary, there's nothing to aggress upon. You know, if there was no distinctions in terms of states, well, then there'd be distinctions in terms of people, and people would aggress on people, right? Or bunny rabbits would aggress on grass, right? Yeah. Well, I hope you like that. We'll probably look at some other ideas or concepts of uh, mythology and see if we can get some other principles. But I'm trying to branch out and maybe actually, you know, I was thinking about like writing some stories and like telling some stories that might have some like cool stuff. Just so like it makes it a lot easier to communicate things when you say things through stories. So I'm thinking maybe, you know, maybe I'll start, you know, saying things through stories and maybe that'll work. So if you want that, you know, leave a comment below. Love to hear your thoughts. Bye.